But this tiny little plant that I have in here in this diagram, it's meant to represent this. And some people who are still asking, I'm going to share this with you as close as possible up here. Right? These plants I have in here, they can get quite big, but they take a while to grow. Right? They don't need much water to grow. I've put some water in here, and you can see the condensation happening on the surface already. Right? A couple of plants. So you need to put some seeds to germinate in there, or just get something, a little bit of moss, get some life, get some plant life in here. And why is it that I can say confidently that I believe my plants in here aren't going to die right away? They're going to survive for quite some time, possibly even indefinitely for the next 5 years, maybe. This can happen. So why do I have that belief? Why should you believe that your system is going to sustain itself? You're going to write the answer to that, but not just in 2 sentences. You're going to write maybe about, I don't know, I would say it might be as long as 250 words, or even longer if you need to. But you're going to use this word, and you're going to use the word photosynthesis maybe several times. You're going to explain why that is relevant to the survival of this. And wherever you use photosynthesis, you should also understand the relevance of how photosynthesis is connected to respiration, and how both are essential for life inside of this mesocosm. Then, it's not just that these 2 things have to be happening, they must have to happen for life to exist. Any kind of life, you need to have photosynthesis for animal life to exist. Not that animals carry out photosynthesis. Of course, we just have a plant in here right now, so it's obvious you must have photosynthesis. It's obvious that there's one thing that must come from the outside to sustain this thing, and that you have to mention. It's obvious that you are going to need a certain amount of water in the system, which is what you added. We've added soil, but this system could go on surviving indefinitely, like a couple years, if these things happen. N2 cycle, nitrogen cycle, C cycle, carbon cycle, and H2O cycle, water cycle. I expect that you guys, even if it's not an IG, or if you didn't take IG, at some point you would have studied about these things and you're familiar with it to some extent already. If you need to go read from your book, from your textbook in chapter 4, and you want to go read about all of this, sure, do that. That's the whole intention. You might as well, if you have to do any research and reading, do it from your book. All of these that have to be included as you describe why you believe this system would be self-sustaining. Now, some people might be saying, oh, this whole activity is kind of like nonsensical. Well, if you search for this on the internet, the Biosphere Project, which we are going to have another activity when we're done with this and what's lined up on Manage Back to come, then we're going to talk about the Biosphere Project. But if you're excited to know what that is and where it happened, you'll find out it happened in Arizona in the US, where a US government-sponsored project happened in the middle of the desert to build a huge dome. And why would they want to invest in such a project? You guys would probably have ideas. You're probably excited to share your understanding of it. But all of what we are doing here at the simple level to begin with is going to be related to that bigger picture. And then there's a picture that's even bigger than the Biosphere Project, which is why a government would invest money in such a project. Not just because they're excited about science and they want to do a project. Okay? They want to do that for a certain reason, to take that information and to take their learning from that. And you might read that that project failed. So that's why I'm telling some of you guys, you build your mesocosm, which is a miniature biosphere really. And if it doesn't survive, you'll reflect on why it didn't survive. And if it survives, we'll say, well, why did it survive? But right now, you're starting off with the assumption that you believe it's going to survive. And if you believe it's going to survive, I want you to explain why you believe it's going to survive. But as you give that explanation, use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms. Use it in the right context. And any other thing you want to add? Any questions?
So where should we be leaving our mesocosm? Like where exactly? Like just in our room, or you want it in sunlight or in a window or something like that?
Well, where do you think you want to leave it? In a dark cupboard or by a window?
By a window.
Right. And the reason for that is kind of like obvious, right? So because it's the only input that it needs from the outside is light for the process of photosynthesis. Okay? So that's the only input it needs from the light. That's the only one we're giving it. But the only input from the outside. It might be that it's going to start drying up in there. We've already sealed it. Let nature take its course inside of there. You could go with an aquatic mesocosm, like I said. This is one thing. Another thing you can go and search for on Google is the ecosphere. I think a couple of years ago when I Googled for it, I found you could get them in India on Amazon.in. I can't remember. But the ecosphere is where you get a nice little dome with some water in it, a little bit of plant material with one shrimp in there. And the makers of it say that it can sit on your desk with sunlight coming to it for 2 years. Of course, there's no guarantee. Your shrimp might die in 1 month, but it could last up to 2 years because there's only one shrimp in there for a reason. You don't want it to reproduce because it's only got a little bit of plant material in there. The shrimp would only eat so much every day and to keep a balance. But again, that too could be another discussion.